My man, Matt, thank you for hopping on with me here and giving me your time. I know how much you love social media. I know how much you love, everything outside of your craft. So I don't take the time lightly.
No, I appreciate that. No, I mean, I think social media is one of those necessary evils, right? But I really appreciate you having me on the show today. This is going to be a great conversation.
Yeah, I'm very excited, especially when I took a deep dive into who you are, some of your recent interviews and different things. It was cool because so I have a friend that's an Emmy Award winner, singer songwriter, been doing it for a long time, done it very well, and came out as an artist. She's always been behind the scenes and came out as an artist and just kind of had one of these moments where she had to do a double take and she's like, this is a little different, and it's funny when I was still living in Okinawa, Japan, she actually said, specifically when I met with her, and I grew up with her husband, so it was like best friend, literally second family. And I remember talking with her and she goes, the industry has shifted to where now people actually want to see what you're eating for breakfast. And as an artist, it wasn't that way, and for you, you're kind of doing rounds on podcasts and in a different dynamic, but very, very similar way. You're kind of doing the rounds, and it's a little bit intrusive, which I love because it's perfect for somewhere in Montana, which you just finished up here, just released, and it's so timely. The City Slickers story. The director going up against the rancher. The good old boy out in the middle of nowhere. And I grew up on a horse farm in Nashville, right? But I actually understand both sides of that to a degree, and not wanting to be on social media, not wanting to share everything, but it is this weird necessary evil. How do you cope with that going into acting in the industry and how it's adapting and changing over the last little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think honestly, for me, I don't look at it as intrusive. I like to let people in on, who I'm about, not just who I am as an artist. I think kind of the way that it goes for me and a lot of artists that I know is that, we use our voices, in terms of what we stand for, right? Because in a movie, you only get like an hour and a half to 2 hours to tell a story. So I think for me, it's really just kind of about diving deep on, why I do what I do and why I love it and what the importance is that I see in it. And so we're gonna have to do a deep dive into Okinawa, my friend, because I actually grew up in a dojo. My father is my sensei, and the practice that I do is Okinawan Shorin-ryu, believe it or not. So yeah, we're gonna have to talk some karate while I'm here.
No kidding, Shoran-ryu,
It's,
right? Wow,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Most people don't even realize that karate is from Okinawa.
right.
So, oh yeah. So did you grew up in the dojo? You said you grew up training, but did you actually have you visited or did you live there or did your dad serve? Like, what's the connection there?
Yeah, so he actually found the practice through New York City. It kind of became kind of a bigger practice in the 70s. And so when he was in New York City, like right at the end of the 70s, it just kind of was one of these practices that he gravitated towards. He really gravitated towards it because it's more of a self practice and what karate should be really. We get into like bastardized sport karate where like kids are fighting each other for trophies and things like that, and it just kind of takes away from the true martial arts, and again, it's arts, right? So it's a self-guided practice, and that's where he gravitated towards it. But yes, we actually went to Okinawa. He's been 3 times. I've only been once, but those 2 weeks that we went around the island, we were treated like kings, specifically because it's very important for them to have people that are ambassadors in other parts of the world to bring that practice to different people. And it really is. I mean, just going around Okinawa, studying with some of these grandmasters. I mean, some of them were like in their late 80s. As you know, Okinawa is one of the longest lifespans in the world. Their way of life is beautiful, and the people are beautiful. And I just really did. I grew up jokingly like a Ninja Turtle. I have three other brothers. My dad, obviously, Master Splinter, and I just did. I was a karate kid growing up. So actually, he has one of the longest running dojos in one place in the country in Front Royal, Virginia, which is the Front Royal Karate Club. So yeah, he's just a practice that he's always loved. He's an 8th degree black belt. I actually just went for my 4th degree black belt last year on May the 4th on Star Wars Day, which is the day after his birthday. So proud dad on May 3rd and going for 4th degree black belt. And again, the practice for me has always kind of been a family element. Like so many of these people are just it's kind of, you beat each other up, like you don't wear pads, obviously, but it's respectful. You're not trying to land punches, you're not trying to hurt each other. And so I think it's so much of really honestly who I've become as an artist is stemmed from my background in karate.
That's wild and something I never would have guessed. A good friend of mine is Josh Simmers. So my wife is Okinawan and so is Josh's. He actually started the Okinawa Karate podcast. I feel like I need to connect you guys where he's interviewed some of the portraits of those original grandmasters, and many of them at this point have passed away, but I'm talking 95-year-olds still training. Like we know them personally. I might have to introduce you to Josh so you can talk about that. And I guarantee he's gonna wanna, if he doesn't already know you guys, by the way, because like Okinawa's wicked small, right? With James Pankiovics and the Dojo Bar. I don't know how long ago you guys visited, but the Dojo Bar is like a staple that I'm sure you guys visited. But James and Josh, they're like super, super close. I have to introduce you guys. He would love to connect with you about that because he actually ironically dragged me into the dojo, but for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, BJJ, and my background was wrestling. So that's kind of how we intertwined. But he's been in karate his entire life. He's been in Okinawa since the early 90s. And he's trying to find as many people as he can that are kind of, like I said, the ambassadors to this. And I think he's got the only Okinawa-based karate podcast, which is crazy because it's from there. So anyway, I didn't expect that at all, but that's...
I know, I heard Okinawa and I was just like, whoa, holy crap, that's amazing.
It's funny because when you live there, you get the same two questions, kind of like in small back towns, right? This small back island is, you ex-military, Quinton? And I go, no. Same exact, in the order, every time. Second question, teacher? English? No. Met my wife in the UK. We moved out. We stayed out there for almost a decade, right? So we actually just made our way back a couple months ago. But Okinawa is wonderful. It's beautiful. And where I lived in the middle of the jungle up in a small village, the longevity aspect of it, I know there's a lot of arguing. I can tell you it's real. I've seen it. I've watched the 80, 90-year-olds with their farms, and I've talked about it ad nausea. But nevertheless, that's amazing, man. How long have you trained?
Since I've been 4 years old. Yeah, my whole life. I literally grew up like on the dojo deck, and I mean, like it really was. It was Ansei Yushiro is the person that my dad studied with primarily in New York, but it really was like he gravitated towards a lot of the people that were around like the Long Island, New York City area. So like Ernie Ferrara, people like that are people that are part of his family tree, so to speak. So yeah, we're gonna have a lot to talk about. I can't wait to meet your friend. That's amazing.
Right, it's a small world, and
it
he
is.
would love to do it. He's a super, super down to earth, friendly guy, as well. But talk to me here, man. I mean, you made quite a big change, and I'm sure that this role kind of impacted you a little bit, going from Virginia, to New York, pursuing acting, which we're gonna get into in the first place of how many people don't make that leap, but. What was it like, just talking about Okinawa and coming back to America? Like, what was that transition, culture shock like?
Yeah, I really honestly feel like in a weird way, I felt like I was going home when I went to Okinawa because it's so much a part of who I am. And it's like it kind of like makes everything make sense in a weird way when you feel like you've grown up in a practice, but then you see it, you see the kind of culture behind it, right? It's just very special. I mean, again, as you know, the Okinawans, I mean, like, they're they're farmers for the most part. So every weapon, that they had to defend themselves with was either a bow staff, which was used for fishing, or a tonfa used to mash the grain, or an aku, which is one of my favorite weapons, which is an oar, and you can do some damage with an oar. Obviously the sai to till the land. So different, weapons and different practices that just really resonated with me. But again, I really appreciated what my dad did, because I think in America, we fall into the trap of, having it kind of become like a subscription service and bringing kids in and, giving them
McDojos.
trophies, McDojos. Yes, exactly. And he absolutely like put a kibosh on that at every turn. And there were times where he could have grown his business. He probably could have franchised it. He probably could have had it in, many, many different states. But he was like, no, that's not my practice. That's not what this practice is. And, I respect so much of what he sees in the practice, because again, it really is, it's that self practice. And I think that's what is so impactful about martial arts. If you're doing it the right way and you're around people that like aren't just trying to take money from you, like it really is. It's that classic thing that like I get asked all the time, because it's like when you're in middle school and high school, people are like, well, how many fights have you gotten? And I'm like, I've never been in a fight in my life, right? Because I know how to take care of myself. And it's like that peaceful warrior approach that I think we really all need to have in our lives. Because, I mean, if you've ever seen a fight in a bar, like it's not pretty. It's not how it looks in the movies. And I do think that for me, it's just kind of one of those things that's like always resonated and again, been a core part of who I am.
How did it teach you in terms of like discipline growing up at such a young age in this, or even transitioning into acting, like staying centered, trying to get into roles? Did that carry over?
Yeah, I think it did, but I think it also gave me an escape from acting. I think
Mm.
that as an actor, as an artist, you need to find ways to have something, else that you're passionate about. You have to find ways to, immerse yourself in a football game or go outside and do some katas, whatever it is that can kind of keep you balanced. Because when you're passionate about something like I am about acting, it can take a toll, right? So you have to find ways to kind of keep that balance and keep that escape. And I think that martial arts has been a big part of that balance for me.
Keeps you down to earth, right? And even the fact that you see both sides, what a fight is like in the movies and then in the bar that you described. I think not nearly enough people realize what you had said there, that the outcome never ends the way the movies end, which is like usually, grandiose and it's quite dangerous. And Josh will tell you the same thing. And everybody that, all the masters that I've had the pleasure of meeting and connecting with is the same thing. They're all like, this is a last resort type of thing. This is
Yes,
like
that's the words. Yep, the last
yeah,
resort.
we
Exactly.
don't seek this out. My Brazilian jiu-jitsu sensei, which he wouldn't let me call sensei, is Helio Damiani Jr. And for him, he calls it flow, but not just flow on the mat, actually flowing in life. Is like you're trying to divert that energy away from the conflict. And at a last resort, things can come out, right? And whatnot. But for you, man, while you're training, you're in the dojo. I always ask this because I'm fascinated what drives people. But who were you in high school? Like, what was your personality like?
Gosh, that's a great question, Quentin. I mean, honestly, I feel like I was one of those kids that really was like balanced. Like you couldn't like kind of pigeonhole me into either, like I'd be doing plays, but I'd be, trying out for the baseball team. I'd, be a martial artist, but, I was training with like an Olympic swim coach. Like I just was really curious about a lot of different things. And so I feel like I didn't have like one specific group that like I hung out with. I was all over the place, and I think that's something that like I've always taken pride in, is that like I love all people. And some people say it, I really actually mean it. I grew up in rural Virginia. I have my mom and dad got divorced when I was about 4 years old. My mom remarried a black man in rural Virginia, and he was my best friend. I really do. I say like I had two fathers growing up because I was really close to him. I was actually the person that told my mom, you should marry Chaz. He's my best friend. And, he passed away a couple years ago. And really, honestly, for me, he really taught me the love of acting because he was a chef, and so the love that he had for food and the inclusiveness that he had in food was inspiring for me growing up, because he always used to say, like, I can make this dish 10 different ways. It could be fine dining, but it could be $9.99. Food is inclusive, and he just was really like a special person, and he protected me from a lot of the racist elements that exist in rural Virginia. My best friend growing up was also black, and it was just kind of like one of those things where you don't even realize it growing up sometimes in kind of a racially charged area, that people come up to you and they're kind of like, oh, your dad is Chaz, or you're friends with Dwayne. Like, you don't hear it the same way, but then when you grow up, you're kind of like, wow. And I think that kind of was like my vessel in a way to get to New York City and to kind of, be around more people. Because again, I just really love all people, and like, I'm curious about all people. And I think that's kind of the actor mind in me, is like, part of your job is to just really take everything in. In the weirdest of circumstances. I mean, I actually, I remember in college there was one, observation technique that we were playing around with, when I was studying at Marymount Manhattan College, and people thought I was nuts, but I really wanted to, kind of study people that just were alone and that were dealing with a lot of mental illness. And so one night I actually went to Penn Station around 2:30 a.m. and stayed there till about 5:30 a.m. because for some reason people that were feeling like alone, or that were, suffering from mental illness, they all came to that spot. And I just like remember myself just observing. I wasn't like taking notes. I was just observing and like wondering like how they ended up there. And so I think it's kind of that process of just being curious about, like, because everybody has a story, everybody has like, just kind of a methodology about them that has always just been something that as someone that loves acting, which I really do. I love talking about like the process of how I got to be an actor. I mean, I always say this, I feel like it was born inside me. I've always wanted to act, but I found myself growing in the process just by continuing that like childlike curiosity in, how can I build different characters different ways. And then you get to, go to New York City and you get to learn from your mentors, and you get to, study with the great Terry Schreiber, who got Edward Norton his start, and you get to go to college and be around so many great acting teachers. And, I was making money in the bars and then spending that money right back to study with everybody. Like, I studied with the great Ron Shetler, who was, one of the greatest voice teachers of our time. And like, he taught me different things to do with my voice. Cause you have to remember, Broadway singers, it's different if you're auditioning for Phantom of the Opera or Jersey Boys or Avenue Q or Spring Awakening. Like, they're different types of, creating character within your voice. And so for me, it was just always about learning, always be learning in life, whether you're an actor or not. Like, always be learning, always be growing. And I think that me being a kid on that dojo deck is a big part of that, right? Because it's your unique process, right? It's nobody's going to do a kata the way that you uniquely will, Quinton, or me. It's different, right? And you find different ways to enjoy that, and then you find different processes within that. For this role in Somewhere in Montana, it's the first time I really went a full method approach. And it's because I felt a lot of Fabian in me, and vice versa. I felt like we were very connected. I got him. He's the first character that I've ever truly fallen in love with. And so for me, I really took that method approach of just kind of combining our two characters and finding ways to build these backstories and really understand him. And that's the joy of what I, am so fortunate to do. And I'm just, I'm prideful when I say this. Like, I'm an actor, I love acting. I love telling great stories. And I think more now than ever, we need really impactful human stories.
God forbid my wife watches a movie with me because I got a room, because I'm like, or an interview, because I'm just like, oh, I would love to segue into that because of my curiosity, right? For you, what was that I gotta ask this, like, growing up in rural Virginia and then going into New York, you said your father was in New York, or excuse me, he had it set up in, he trained in, I'm like struggling on my words here. He trained in New York with some of the grandmasters, established a dojo in Virginia. You grew up there. and then you transition your way into New York City. Was New York just the hot spot that you needed to be, or like what took you away from rural Virginia to go up there?
Yeah, it felt like actually I was going back home when I went to New York City because my mom and dad originally are from New York City and they moved to Virginia and that's where they met. And so when I moved back to New York City, it was at a time where my grandma was going to be alone. She was actually, my aunt was living there at the time. She was moving out. And for me, New York City made the most sense. I'd grown up doing theater. It was home to me. Again, I spent my Thanksgivings and Christmases and major holidays up there anyway. So it made sense. It was like the natural progression for me to move back home in a weird way. Even though I had never lived there because of my extended family living there, it really did. I was one of those, kids moving back to New York City that wasn't looking up. I was looking forward, right? And there's just really those are such impactful years that I'm so fond of, Quentin, because again, it's like when you're in a complex city of like in New York City, like you can very easily stray from your path. And I feel like because I was living with my grandmother, like I was coming home every night. I was being taken care of, and I took care of her too. We took care of each other, right? We would go to the operas together. We'd be in bed watching Law and Order together. We'd go to our favorite restaurants, and like we just were buddies. It was just really really special for me. I always say this, I'm kind of a grandma's boy if I'm being honest, and like those are just really special years that I'm so fond of because we really needed each other, but I think we gave each other something because she was still working at my family business, Drago Shoe Repair. We're not God, but we do save souls. But that was kind of my family business, and so it was just something that she would get up every morning at like 5 in the morning and go down to the shoe repair place, and sometimes I'd be getting off and coming back from the bars at like 4:30 in the morning, and sometimes I'd have an audition at 9 a.m. But again, it was just a time in my life where I just felt like she really got that this was my opportunity to kind of spread my wings, to kind of figure out what I was going to do with this. And I think a big part of her really protecting me in the process is because she saw how much I loved it, and she wanted to make sure that I didn't stray from my path because it was so important to me.
Wow. So then when you went to New York and you were making that transition, it was with the intention of acting. It wasn't just to move into the big city. Okay.
Yeah, I went to Marymount Manhattan College. I got the bachelor's in acting, the musical theater minor. And again, I mean, it's crazy, but like, I mean, even though I was, in college, like all the time, I still took classes outside of college. I still went to Actors Equity, which for your listeners is the Broadway union. And I would go, stay there if I didn't have a day at the bar, or if I didn't have a class, and just stay there for 6 to 8 hours and audition for a bunch of shows. So I really took full advantage of the fact that like I did have this incredibly strong foundation to work off of, and I feel like it made me be able to really dive deeper into what I could get out of those formative years of my life, and that's because I had my grandma.
No kidding. So take me back. You're making the move, you're packing everything up, you get there, you find out, you get your acceptance letter and all of that. First day in New York, you're driving in. What's going through your mind? At this point, you don't even know if is this thing gonna work out? What am I doing here? College is college, if anyone that's been there knows what I mean by that, right? What take me back?
Yeah, pure excitement. I mean, honestly, I just felt like it was my opportunity to really meet a lot of people. I had met some at the college, the auditions that we had, and I just felt like it was, Marymount is a small liberal arts college on the Upper East Side, and so it's a lot smaller. I mean, everybody in your class, like it's little 12 people classes, and getting to do your musical theater with the great Pat Simon, John Zendarzik. I studied with Kevin Connell. Like these were little classes, and so you knew everybody. And then when you're doing a show, like it was that same group of people. people. I got to do Into the Woods, I got to do Richard II, and they were considered like off Broadway, because it's still in New York City. And sometimes, you'd have like little celebrities like, come to some of the shows, and you'd just be like, wait, that's the person that played that role on Broadway? Because I remember one night, like, Pat Simon, who is just, I mean, she's a queen of Broadway, musical theater in New York City. Like, she's a great teacher. And I played the Prince in Into the Woods, and we were doing like a gala event. And at one point, like, she came up to me and she was like, that guy that just gave you that compliment? He was like, and I was like, yeah. He said, like, there were jokes that you found that were just so extraordinary. Like, the way that you played it, like, was just really great. And you found your light, which was actually really cool, because it kind of was the first spark, and kind of like, maybe I should get a little bit more into TV and film, because TV and film's a little bit more technical. But like, he walked away and I was like, wow, that was such a really wonderful compliment. And Pat came up to me and she was like, you know who that was? He played that on Broadway. Like, he played my role on Broadway. And so to get that compliment was like really extraordinary. And again, those are the types of things where, when you are around your people, I mean, it brings you so much joy. Like, it really does. Like, I get so fired up being around artists because they inspire me. We inspire each other. Like, we're part of the same team. I say this all the time, but I really do. I think it's a big misnomer that should get destroyed, is that, like, actors are some of the most selfless people I've ever met in my life. And I, hand to God, mean that, Quentin. Like, they are people that hold a lot of space for others. They give so much energy to others. And most of them get into it for the simple reason they want to leave impactful stories behind. Like, they love telling great stories. They love immersing themselves into, different psyches of, human existence, and hopefully make a little change here and there, make people feel. Because I feel like when we are feeling, we're always at our best. When we turn our positive feelings off, that's when things get a little dicey, right, with humanity. And I kind of feel like that's where we're at right now. So I just I feel very honored to call myself an actor, and I feel very honored when I'm around other actors that just inspire me on a daily basis.
You hinted at it, but you started out on stage, and then you had a little bit of a light bulb moment to get into TV and film. What was that thought process like? Because I've had some friends that have told me that they have enjoyed live action theater, or stage theater more. But, it's like you said, more technical. There's more nuance. There's a zooming in on your face, and the nuances of the expression, rather than projecting so that the person in the last row can hear you just as well. What was that light bulb and thought process where you're like, okay, I might make this transition?
I think it's just curiosity again, right? It's different parts of the same art, right? You're still acting, but it's a different medium. I mean, I say I love that I got to grow up as a theater actor. Theater's live; it's alive, and so I feel like you're around, just that instant response, and you can work off of crowds. And one of my first professional gigs was a children's show. It was a tour for a children's show, and I'd have like shows that were like at 9:30 in the morning, and it's you don't bring energy for a room full of kids, like, you're not gonna get it back. Like, you have to bring it, right? So it really, like, I'm very grateful that growing up in Virginia, because again, there wasn't a lot of TV and film in Virginia when I was growing up. Like, it showed me, like, okay, well, this is the art form that's available to me, right? So let me immerse myself in what's available to me. And, that was probably about, to the tune of 15 to 20 community theater shows. I tell actors all the time, like, when you don't have to have a job and you don't have to worry about, like, bills, like, be in the theater, like, be telling stories. Like, that is the best way to learn your craft, because you'll realize things that work and the things that don't work. And so that was a big thing for me. Again, doing it in middle school, high school, basically being part of all of those productions. But again, finding my outside of that, whether it was going for my first or second degree black belt. I actually learned how to fly before I could drive a car. Like, I became a pilot growing up, and I started flying when I was 14 years old, and like I loved that too. So again, I think it's just kind of been I was an adventure diver too. I'm a scuba diver, so like I don't know. I really love to extract everything that you can out of life. And I think that that has always been my mentality. So, to answer your question, when I moved to New York City, there was my safe haven, which was Terry Schreiber's studio. And I actually was, curious about getting into TV and film acting from, a couple people that said that maybe I had a knack for it. And so I got into a TV and film acting class that was taught by the great Peter Miner, who was the director of One Life to Live for about a decade. He taught it with his wife, so it was so cute. Like the two of them, like just kind of nurtured their actors, and you'd get on screen, and then you'd kind of watch it back, and you'd kind of see where your eye lines were, and just be technical, but also dive into the character because it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more nuanced, and so I fell in love with that. But also something that was really special in that moment is I met a girl, and I was paired together in a breakup scene from Say Anything, the John Cusack movie, right? And we're paired together from the scene where she gives him the pen. And it really didn't even occur to me because she actually didn't come to the first class. But I went up to Peter and I said, do you want us to workshop this a couple times, for the week and bring it back in, get together with Elizabeth? He was like, oh no, Elizabeth isn't your partner. Laura is. She's taken the class twice before. Have her over, like, get acquainted with like the technical aspects of this scene, look at the scene, right, the way that it was done cinematically, and really just enjoy that process. And so had her over to grandma's apartment, and at one point I'm pulling through to my closet to look for the scene, and I noticed the call sheet had a 5-4 area code, and I was like, where are you from in Virginia? I have a 5-4 area code. And she looked at me at that moment and she said, Front Royal. And I said, excuse me? She said, Front Royal, Virginia. Have you heard of it? And I mean, again, we're only a year apart. Like I said, I'm from Front Royal. And, she was like, there's literally no way. And I said, no, my dad's the karate guy across from the Main Street Cinema. And I used to do theater here. And I know this person. I know this person. I was like, well, what does your family do? She was like, my family owns the Apple House, which is, a small country store that's off the interstate that only somebody in that area would know. And on 79th and Broadway, hand to God, Quinton, I literally looked at my dresser and I said, look at my dresser. There were 3 things with the price tag still on them from the Apple House. And so, I mean, that's like kismet, right? Sometimes it's like the law of attraction in life, and that too. So it was, just a moment in time that I'm always really fond of. It's a great story. Hopefully we make a movie of it someday. I literally looked at her and I said, well, we've already gotten the breakup out of the way. Are you ready to go out on a date? And that's when we started dating. And she was a big part of, why I decided to try LA, because we had, I don't want to say struggled in New York, and it was very difficult. One of the hardest things that I've ever had to do in my life, because I was so close to my grandmother. But Terry Schreiber brought me into his office one day. We talked for about a half an hour, and I was up for quite a few Broadway roles and really close to a lot of them, and just missing out, whether it be somebody that had, a TV film credit, or, somebody that was, from a reality show or something like that. And he could just see me starting to get down on myself and not believe in myself. And this is why I say he's a grandfather to me. And I need to give him a call because he's so special. I mean, like, he's just a lover and nurturer of actors, and being in his class for 2.5 years was just such a gift in my life. But he, basically said, like, and again, I'd be leaving his class, but he said, maybe you should give LA a shot. And so, I did. And at the time, I, floated the idea out to Laura, and she was totally gung-ho because another winter in New York, she was like, let's pack the bags. So, we packed her place on 87th and Amsterdam, my stuff on 79th and Broadway. And I think I'd saved up, enough money to, give, a big chunk of it to my grandma to make sure that she was okay, because it was really hard. And we drove across the country, one winter day right after the holidays so we could spend the holidays with our family. And it just felt like home. Like, it really did. It felt like, again, it was like the next chapter, because sometimes, like, you have to look at those signs in your life and look for things that you need to do that are hard, that are painful sometimes. But, if you're open to that, which I kind of always have been. You can probably tell from my mentality. It's like I search for things. And if something's telling me something, I listen. And this was a time in my life I had met this beautiful girl, and she wanted to give it a shot. And she had a friend that had, a grandfather that was like renting out a house in LA, and he gave us a great deal. And so we stayed with him for 3 months. And he was originally from Brooklyn. He's like this Jewish man making us matzo ball soup, and it was special for me because it made me feel like I was around a grandparent, and I think that was something that I was missing at the time. And of course, I was calling grandma left and right. But yeah, those times are just it's kind of a blur, to answer your question. But I feel like it's always one of those blurs I look fondly at because I feel like I was open to wherever the path was going to take me, and I was willing to be open to it.
I gotta tell you, okay, so I have so many questions that came from that, but I mean, I'd be crazy not to point something out here because I hope the audience didn't miss this here, because it's the same way I find in business. So for me, the times that I'm curious, the times that I'm in the dojo, I'm doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and the times that, because I'm a scuba diver, obviously living in Okinawa, like I was diving, I mean, literally like 4 or 5 times a week for a solid year, like all the time. And fun fact,
we got a lot in common. This is crazy.
I know, right? Exactly. But I find, and I'm going to circle back here, and I promise this is going to be very relevant. But the times for me when I am the most in love with life and I'm curious have been when I've made the most progress in what I'm trying to do. Most of the time, the progress that I make is something not even related to it, if that makes any sense. Meaning, I'm winning in life, but I'm kind of in a rut in my business or in my growth. And when I'm loving life, it just seems to flow and naturally go. I mean, you don't, go to the UK, meet a Japanese woman, go on vacation and get married in 3 months, kind of elope the way I did without, really focusing on the flow of life, kind of what you had mentioned there. But I just don't want to skip over that and pretend like that's casual, because you're talking about diving and like growing up doing karate, and you're a pilot at age 14, and like there's such a genuine curiosity. And I have been told by mentors of mine in business several times, they've never met an interesting person that doesn't, yes, they've never met an interesting person that doesn't do interesting things outside of like their career, outside of their business, right? It's not necessarily balance per se, like Musashi from the Five Rings, but I think there's this weird untold law about when you're in love with life of what you're doing, things, as I said, completely unrelated. You're like loving getting into the dojo, you're loving, flying for the first time, and it's like, oh wow, my sales magically increased, and it's like, I think there's something there, and again, that's, I don't have data behind that, but I'm like, man, from my experience, the one of the most successful business owners I've ever been privileged to be around, billionaire kind of guy, loves cars, like fanatical about cars, loves travel, incredible. He will eat his food before you've taken your third bite. He'll be done, and he's like. And I even brought it up. I was like, you just killed your breakfast. And he's like, I don't care. I've always been this way. I love my food. I'm going to enjoy my food. And I'm not going to allow, like this posh, mentality of I got to wait around. It's like, that's my love. And there's this little kid tendency that I find in people that are good at what they do and ultimately like actually progress, in what they're doing. And this is what I'm hearing from you. Now, I can't just move on without asking, why were you a pilot at age 14?
Well, I did want to make one point, and it's like, if you're not aware of the energy that exists on this planet, like, you're not paying attention. And I really do. I mean that. Like, I feel like for so many people, like, if you're not paying attention to the energy and where that pull is coming from, like, then you're not paying attention. I think that is the best thing that we can do in life, is to really just be aware that, sometimes like just being open to your own path, it'll carve itself out for you, but you have to be open to it. And I think that's one thing that I wanted to say. So back to pilots. I mean, again, growing up in the dojo, so many different types of people that my dad attracted. And I think that's a really special thing that you probably know of the dojo, is it attracts so many different people from so many different walks of life. I mean, Quentin, we had like people that were priests, we had people that were U.S. Marshals, we had people that were prison guards, teachers, what have you. Like, it was like, just this really cool, wonderful, family, right, that came together. And some of them I really do. I call them uncles. Like, I call, Art Daniels Uncle Art. I call, John Musser or Uncle John. It's like, if these people knew I was in trouble, I could call them up and they would, be there for me. There's that camaraderie and that bond that's created through karate. Well, I had another Uncle John. I had two Uncle Johns. One, John Olinger, who was a flight instructor. And so my dad growing up, basically just kind of said, like, son, would you be interested in this? Because, he can basically teach you to fly for free. You'll rent, we'll rent the plane, and, maybe you'll have like another skill set. Because again, I think he saw how much I loved acting, but he always wanted me to have balance outside of it. And so, I always say this, but I mean, like, becoming a pilot, I soloed at 14. I got my license at 16. It's the hardest college course I've ever taken, because it's mathematics, it's practicality, it's communications. It's fascinating. And there really is, I mean, there's that time that I reflect on all the time, which is, the first time that I soloed, right? I got my license like right at 16 years old. And the first time that I took off by myself, I mean, it is exhilarating. You are fearful, but like excited at the same time. And then you have that lift. And again, you're just circling around the airport and coming back down. But, the way that John did it was almost like, he would say to a nephew. One day I was just literally, we were taxiing, to the runway. And he literally looks at me and he looked and he just said this. He was like, all right, 3 takeoffs, 3 landings. And he got out of the plane. And so, yeah, right. So it's just kind of like one of those things. Like, it's like, that's the relationships that I had. And so I feel like, that's what we should all aspire to do growing up, is, and really in our lives, is like, learn from people that like do things that are different from you. If he hadn't been in my life, I wouldn't have been a pilot. And because I caught the bug, I mean, it was another crossroads. I always talk about like crossroads in my life, because again, sometimes like you have to choose one way or the other. I really loved flying. Like, I could have seen myself being a pilot, and maybe eventually, like, I'll have the time and the money, because it's expensive to get back into it. But I got my commercial license shortly thereafter at 18 years old, so I could fly for hire. And then I was basically really close to getting my multi-engine license as well. And it's because of all these relationships that I had developed in Virginia, people that would give me, these planes for way cheaper than, they would have been worth. Again, so much of going to New York City was the reason why I couldn't fly anymore, because a Cessna 152 or 172 that was $75 to $85 an hour was now $350 an hour. The instructors that I was basically getting for free, or the airtime. I mean, there was one guy that I knew that had an Aztec, which is a multi-engine plane, and he let me fly it for free as long as I would go to Maryland and gas up for him. So it was like I was getting like flight time in this really nice plane just for flying it around. So again, like, take advantage of life, right? Take advantage of life. Growing up, I never thought like, let me learn how to fly a plane before I could drive a car. And yes, my dad had to drive me to the airport so that I could fly around. I mean, it's like the weirdest thing ever. Like, I did not have my driver's license, but like I could fly a plane around. And again, like, this is such a great conversation, because it's like, for anybody listening, like, take advantage of those opportunities. Like, they're fleeting, and sometimes you just, it's like that classic thing of like the regrets in life are when you said no to something. Like, it's very rare that you regret something where you said yes, where like it could be an adventure, it could be an opportunity, and it could be something that teaches you something. because it was so different from what I was doing in acting that like the technical aspects of flying, I was like, wow, this is really cool because, you know, it's exciting. And this was really something that I always reflect fondly is that my dad and I actually took a trip and I got to fly him out to a dojo in Michigan. And we took a 4 hour flight. And at one point, Quinton, we're over Canadian airspace and I'm looking down at Windsor and I'm over Lansing. And then I'm basically actually over, you know, water. Cause I mean, that path basically goes over water for a good hour, you know? And so like, it's scary the first time that you're over water, there's no land underneath you. You know, so it was just one of those things where, you know, getting to fly my dad and, you know, what would normally be like a 10-12 hour trip through the mountains, like we're just flying direct and, you know, just flying directly to Lansing Airport and then flying home a couple days later. I mean, those are special times that I reflect on. And again, like, you know, say yes, because then you never know where that path's going to take you. But if you're open to it, like we went back to, it's like be open to that energy. Like there's something mystical about this planet. There's something mystical about this life. I believe in that. Just be open to where the path will take you and you'll find your way.
Well, man, I want to say thank you here because, you know, me and my wife have been working on coming to the States, and it took about 4 years or so. Did everything legally, jazz, all that jazz you could imagine. The visa process is just as much fun as you can imagine it is, and is just probably more paperwork than you can even imagine. But when we got here in mid-December, which was a huge blessing because it was like the first holiday season in almost a decade, maybe longer than that, that all of the family could be together. And for the first time, my wife could be here, and then even my firstborn son could be here, which has been amazing. But I want to thank you because I haven't plugged in because I've been so focused on getting back to work and getting reestablished, and I've had to even hold off on some interviews and just, all right, now what? What's the plan? When you move, you know, to the other side of the planet, like things shift. But I haven't had that love or the curiosity. So it probably wouldn't surprise you as I describe this that I haven't gotten back into the dojo yet. And I've kind of felt like it's not real. It is just my imagination, but I've kind of felt like I've been in this little bit of a rut or this a little bit of like, I'm trying to build this thing for several months now, separate from the podcast and the interviews, just work wise, but I'm not getting, and I'm like wondering, why does it feel like I'm running through mud? Well, you just gave me my answer here. It's that curiosity for life. Exactly what I just described. The people that have those hobbies, the people that are doing those things from genuine curiosity are the ones that, in a totally unrelated way, seem to make progress in other facets as well. And I think you just gave me a big clue or insight about what this is. I feel like I've worked for so long and so hard and waited so long to actually get here that now that I'm here, it's like, all right, work, instead of like, where's that childhood curiosity yet again, you know, and the joy of being back in the hometown for the first time in 15 years or whatever, how long, just whatever. But I want to thank you for that because I had that little light bulb there. One thing you mentioned I wanted to ask about here was this in your role here was one of the first times that you did full method acting for Somewhere in Montana. Why this role did you do that? I know you had mentioned how much you loved the character, but what got you to go in this time versus others full method?
Yeah, a great question. I think honestly it comes back to just being in Terry Schreiber's studio and being able to study so many different types of you know, practices within acting. And you know what was so special about him and his class is that, you know, he'd teach you Meisner, he'd teach you Stanislavski, he'd, you know, teach you Strasberg method. He, you know, we even did kabuki training, which is Japanese body work and finding the character in your body, which as a martial artist, I'm sure you can appreciate, like I really gravitated towards, right? Because it's how you hold yourself and how you see yourself in the character. I think because Fabian Verdugo is so much in alignment with who I am as an artist, and the story was so impactful to me, This is the first time like I read the script 3 times before I even put myself on tape. I found myself being so in love with this story, regardless of whether I was going to be a part of it or not. And I really mean that. And so I think for me, it was, I'll go back to the beginning, which was, studying with my, teacher down here in the Valley. And when I finally put it on tape, I mean, because nowadays you can put something on tape 10, 20, 30 times and pick, take 16 and, like whatever. And so for me, I just really been so fascinated by this script. And again, we talk about energy, we talk about path. The reason that I got this audition was because I was working in a restaurant in Valencia. And there was a girl that I worked with for a while there. And she was originally from Montana. She had moved down with her husband and her 2 kids. And now she's got 3 kids. And she didn't have an agent. And at the time, I was with my agent for a long time. I saw her commitment and I said, hey, put yourself out there to my agent. I'll connect you to, no promises, but maybe he'll sign you. And he did. And so that was great. It got her an opportunity. And I feel like she's always remembered that, but it's always kind of in my mentality anyway, is that like, it's all cyclical. It's like, if you can help people, like things come back to you in ways that you don't expect. So I really like helping out people, and especially good people, like Zuzu Weingart and her husband, Kyle. And so they moved back to Montana in 2019. Jokingly, I always say like, how did you know? Right. Because they escaped like California and moved out to Montana and in 2020, and a few years passed, and she gave me a call out of the blue one day, and it was about 2.5 years now, and she said, Matt, my friend Brandon Smith wrote a script, and every time I see I read one of the lead characters, I see your face. And again, just a moment of humility, something that like I'll always be so fond of, because it really did. It made an impact on me that she was looking out for me in the ways that I looked out for her, right? Because we like to help each other out. We like to help people that we care about. And so, I said, well, how do I put myself on tape? This would be really great. I love it. I love the character. And she gave me all of the information. And so I really did. I dove right into it because, again, it's such a big story. It's a story of the times. It's a lot about, legacy and American legacy, and honoring each other's legacies and finding mutual respect, which I find in my life is the highest form of love you can give another person. And so it was a big story. It was a brave story. And so for me, I found myself like diving into this character even before, I'd been granted the part. And so I, did it once for my acting teacher on tape, and he just kind of gave me this face. He was like, and I was like, what does that mean? And he was like, I wouldn't tell you to change a thing. Like, you have a very clear take on what you want to do with this character. And so, you could do this scene like 10, 20 more times today, but you would just get in your head. Like, this was an instinctual performance, and it really, obviously it can be fine tuned here or there, but like it's a great take. Just send it in. And so I did. I just sent it in. And, a few weeks passed by. And again, part of the actor journey is that you have to enjoy the audition. The audition is the win. I always say that. Like, it's your opportunity to bring yourself to a character. If you love acting, like, this is your chance to act. This is your chance to bring yourself uniquely to a character. And yes, it's a little inorganic. You're in front of a wall. Maybe you're in front of a backdrop. But it's the opportunity to dive into something really quickly and make some really good choices, right? And so, that comes from your practice, that comes from your process, your craft, and all that stuff. And so, a couple weeks passed by, and then I got the call from Jared that he wanted the local casting director, Jared Brocksterman, that he wanted to set up a producer session with Eden Matson and Brandon Smith, the writer-director. And it was like 45 minutes. And it was just, honestly, I feel like we only ran the scene maybe once or twice. It was really just about again, being curious. That's kind of always who I've been. And I was really curious about this character. I was curious about this big story. I felt like it was impactful. These are the stories that I've always wanted to tell as an artist, things that I felt like could make a lasting impact. And especially with the times that we're in right now, I mean, this is a story that really can resonate with everybody, including me, right? So for me, it was just about doing the scene a couple times, but really getting to know, Eden and Brandon, because again, so much of acting is collaboration. It's serving the material, it's serving the director, it's serving the writer, it's serving the producer, it's serving all of the crew members that are busting their ass to make like the shot perfect, right? Because what is so amazing about film, Quentin, is like you've got so many masters of craft. Like you're on set and it's like I can't gaff that light the way that, you know, Jason can. I can't get the sound when there's like a monsoon coming over the hill the way that Travis can. Like you find your like self being curious and like all of these different masters of craft, you know? And so it's just a fun world to be part of. And so again, you know, when I got off that Zoom call, let it go. You know, you have no control after that. And you know, a month went by, and Jared got in touch with me one day, and you know, he had basically told me that, you know, I'd been granted the role, and I said that because I always say that. I mean, in my 20s, maybe even in my teens, it's like you book it, you know, you impress your agent, you impress your manager. No, like get past that as early as you can, because it's got to be about your craft as an artist. It's got to be about the roles that are meant for you will find you somehow, some way. Just do the work. Just keep enjoying the work. Find the joy in the work. And I found so much joy in this character. And so when I hung up the phone with Jared, I mean, honestly, the first thing that came to mind was, okay, Matt, it's time to get to work. Because that's where the work begins. And so for me, it was really just about finding ways to explore this character. And I think Fabian, I saw him as somebody that was passionate, somebody that would go down with his own ship. Sometimes to some people on the outside, that looks like a diva. He's not a diva. He's the guy that will, you know, put himself out there and again, will go down with his own ship and cares about his family. His family are his cast and crew. He will do everything that he can in his power to protect them. And again, he's, you know, fighting against the clock, as we all are, right? To leave behind a couple good stories. And so as I found myself diving into Fabian, I found myself like really like falling in love with him. And I felt so much of him was me. And so it made sense at that point to go a method approach. And one thing that I did for this role is I lost 25 pounds. I hired a nutritionalist. You know, I did it very healthy, because that was a big thing for me. I don't want to do it unless it's healthy. Matt likes to, you know, drink his protein shakes. He likes to lift his weights, but I felt like uniquely this character was lean. He forgot to eat meals. He was super hyper driven on, you know, everybody else, but sometimes not himself, to his own detriment. And so when I leaned out for this part, I felt like I was in the body of the character. Because remember, it was like 6 weeks of leaning out for this part, and then I had to keep that weight off while I was, you know, on set. And so, you know, Jennifer and Nathan DeTracy, who are two fitness coaches that I work with, you know, they gave me 5 small meals during the day, told me when to work out, how to work out, when. It was like not weights, it was kitchen and cardio basically. And you know, just finding ways to keep that weight off. And that way I felt like I was truly in the body of the character, and finding again that kabuki training, you know, because again, he's a little bit more, you know, kind of proper, right? You know, and so I did. I just, as I started to dive deeper into his backstory and building the character, I did. I felt like the two became one, even to the point where my acting teacher at one point said, you can go ahead and forget the name Fabian now. You can just be Matt. Like, Matt is enough, because the two had kind of become one. And you don't lose yourself. I mean, I will say that, like, there are a lot of bastardized method approaches, and those are the ones that unfortunately get all the airtime. Method is a great practice, because again, it creates a dynamic where you've done everything to bring your character to you and you become one. But yes, you have conversations that ground you as Matt off screen with Graham McTavish or Michelle Hurd. You know, you find ways to have, you know, conversations, or like I said, do a kata, right? I mean, I go back to that, but I'm a martial artist. So it's like you find ways to ground yourself in both character, you being you and Fabian being one, but you've uniquely created like a dynamic where you've brought the two together. And that's really honestly where the magic happens. When you're on set, you kind of let all that go, and then you just say the words because you've done all of the work. You feel uniquely like the character, and that's really when the magic happens. So I think that method made sense for this character. I don't know if it'll make sense for every character, but for me, for this one, I felt like it definitely made a lot of sense. And again, I'm so grateful for the mentors that I've had in my life that have kind of given me all of these different tools, you know, because that's the way I look at it. And then I can kind of cherry pick which tool makes sense for this dynamic character. And again, and as I started to be on set and learn more and more about this character just by being in Montana, I started to realize, the lasting impact that he will have on me. And that's my next chapter. My wife and I have our own production company. And, it's coincidentally, her maiden name is Hunter. So Drago and Hunter, Dragon Hunter Productions, makes Dragon Hunter Productions. And very much like in the vein of Fabian, he wants to give stories to little pockets of the country that feel like they don't have a voice. And I feel like that's a big part of the dissonance that we're feeling in our society right now, is people feeling like they don't have a voice. And what better way to give it to them than in a story that's impactful, that's human, that tells the flaws, that tells the goods and the bads of people. Because learning, so much about this story, which was such a big story written by Brandon, is that, we're both, John and I, the protagonists and the antagonists of our own stories. And isn't that so true in life? So as I started to, really become one with Fabian, I see it as my next chapter where, much like Fabian directing films and leaving a couple good, impactful stories behind, Matt's going to do that as well, as a producer with his wife, right? Because there's nobody better to collaborate with than somebody that you love. And our first story that we want to tell as a feature together is right back from where we're from, in Front Royal, Virginia, a Christmas movie. So the journey continues. And again, you find ways when you do the method approach sometimes to keep certain parts of the character with you. And that's what I've done with Fabian.
For other roles, did you feel like you wanted to do method, but found it a little harder maybe to step into those shoes the way you could with Fabian?
Yeah, it definitely was an easy fit for me with Fabian. I feel like certain characters are a little bit more out of your scope, right? In terms of maybe the crossover that you have between your life and the character's life. There was such a rich tapestry of Fabian that I felt like was kind of a lot to do with my journey. Things that were different, obviously, but I felt like I could lean in on really just kind of diving into connecting us at every level. But yeah, there's different approaches for different characters that I found to be a little bit more true. And that's why I say I think that you find uniquely when you have great mentors to have tools and have ways to develop the characters. And so, if I have a character that's a serial killer, well, you have to find the commonality sometimes,
Uh-oh.
but maybe but again, I'm going the opposite route, right? It's
Of
like you
course,
have
of
to
course.
you have to find the kind of like ways to get there, because again, it's all about finding the humanity in every character. But if you don't have as much crossover, sometimes method is a little bit harder to get to. You can find different ways to do that. And that's why, again, I'm really grateful that I was given so many tools in New York. It's one of the reasons as a kid, I remember, like you said, like going up on that train the first time and just feeling exhilaration and excitement, because I knew I was about to learn a lot and always be learning in life. Like if you are learning, then you're never going to be stuck. If you're around people that, motivate you, that keep you curious, that keep you energized, you're going to keep growing, and the path will take you where it's supposed to.
And you were at a restaurant when you got the call for this? You were working at a
Um,
restaurant?
so I actually at that point, well, for Fabian, I actually was I was working at this restaurant with Zuzu, and she had called me when she was in Montana to let me know about this role.
Got it. When you were okay, so I think the other side of this is so many people, they want to do what they want to do, and there's a process to getting there, and I'm assuming just from this one conversation that maybe working at a restaurant isn't the ideal job that you're wanting to do here. Were there times where because it just sounds like you have such an optimistic perspective, and the wide-eyed curiosity, in a respectful way. I mean it in the best way possible. The curiosity of a child. Were there times where you're like, am I ever gonna make it as an actor?
Of course, of course. I mean, there's always times where you doubt things in life. I mean, that's part of the human experience. But I think for where I'm at right now, I say this. It's like I feel like I'm in the sweetest spot of my life. Is that I'm really just enjoying it. and I'm very like prideful of the fact that I was the top task rabbit in LA when I moved here, because I didn't have a job when Laura and I moved out here. It was just like cleaning people's houses, or fixing up their backyard, or organizing their closets, or painting a bookshelf, or whatever it was. And like I take pride in the long nights at the bar, because I feel like it's created just character in me, that, like, again, I was never going to be one of those people that fully gave myself over to a plan B, that, like, I really knew what I wanted, and I was going to do whatever it took to keep the dream alive. And I feel like when you take pride in that, because we all do things that maybe we're not passionate about, but like if you're doing it to serve a purpose, whether it's to put food on your table for your kids, or to buy a house, or whatever it is. For me, I really do, like, now at this point, like, I'm proud of myself for all the late nights at the bar, where I was making money and then putting it right back into my craft. Like, I have not been given a lot, and I think it's developed my character in really fighting for it a lot harder than maybe some will. And then the wins become bigger. I don't know how to describe it, because they're uniquely your wins. It's not something that was giving to you. It was something that was earned. And I feel like I have earned a lot of my success just on my own volition. And that's something, again, that, like, take pride in that, and know that you can do it too. That's the thing too. Like, for all your listeners, it's like just know that, like, work is character building sometimes. And when you start to enjoy the work, I've always enjoyed acting, but, like, I admire the fact that, like, yeah, I have taken jobs that maybe I'm not passionate about to keep the dream alive. So you take pride in that, and it really it builds your character for when things break a little bit more in your favor.
Hmm. You mentioned the law of attraction a couple times here. Is that a big, I'm sensing somewhat of a theme, in a kind of the way that you've described a lot of the answers things that we've talked about here. Is that a big element in your life?
I think it has to be. I mean, look at, like, the girl that I met from 3 blocks away, in literally the room next to where I had that, pivotal meeting with Terry Schreiber, right? That I was going to meet my future wife, like, literally right next door to his office. It's literally one door down. So I think that I've always had it, but I think it's shown up for me so many times in my life that how could I not, So I think it's one of those things where just being open to it, yeah, it's law of attraction, but because I've put myself out there and always been curious and always been learning and looking for signs in my path, as an artist, as a creative, it shows up in big ways, like, who my partner is, and where my journey took me from New York to LA. So I feel like it's proven to be true in my life.
Hmm. Is it more of a kind of an unintentional thing, or do you intentionally? So, for example, I actually interviewed Lynn McTaggart. I don't know if you know who that is. That's Joe Dispenza. She worked with Joe before Joe was Joe back in the day, and she was a journalist and wrote The Field and Living the Field and a couple of those books, and which in a lot of ways the science and the data behind that and the scientists she's interviewed led to kind of the secret, the book that was published. And I don't know, what's that called, the documentary she was featured in, What the Bleep Do We Know, right, back in the day, that kind of thing. And I interviewed her about this. Is it very intentional for you in terms of, like, visualization, or is it much more of just, I'm living my life, I'm wide-eyed, I'm curious, and I'm open to whatever happens? Or do you know what I mean by that when I ask that?
Absolutely. I think at one point, like, it was a little bit more intentional, where I was developing the craft of being curious and finding the law of attraction. But I think at this point in my life, it's almost like my acting process. It's like that, I feel like I just have the foundation for it now. It's part of me. It does kind of, bring you back, like you said, to your childlike state. But sometimes you have to work for it, right? Sometimes you have to be intentional to get yourself there. I feel like I've done it so many times in my life that now it's a part of who I am. Very much like my acting process. It's like I don't have to overthink about it or doubt myself anymore, because I think my process has proven to be a good process, and I'm constantly reinventing it. But again, just really kind of diving into just what you know, and being intentional, and finding ways where it's kind of manifested things in your life that maybe you would have manifested for yourself, make those things kind of prove to be true.
That makes total sense. So then what's next? You had mentioned this. Was it Drago? Was it Dragon Hunter, like actual Dragon Hunter production company?
So it's Dragon Hunter Productions, but
Okay, got it.
Drago
Mm-hmm.
N Hunter. So Dragon
Ah,
Hunter. Yeah,
got
yeah.
it. Got it. Got
The
it. Got it.
N. The N makes it
Okay.
Dragon and Hunt. Yeah.
So you guys are you guys wrote the script. Is this in
She wrote
production
it.
or okay. Okay.
She's the writer. She was an actress in New York City, and she found writing a few years ago. Now she's in project involved at Film Independent. She's one of the 5 fellows there. She's gonna have a short film produced this year. We might have a couple other short films that we're looking at producing as well. But the big fish is always the feature, and she actually has won 2 awards already that are right over there on the shelf from Northern Virginia Film Festival for this script called Christmas in Helton. Originally, Front Royal on the map, believe it or not, was called Helltown, and it's got a weird mystic energy to it. I will say that it was the area where the North and the South in the Civil War, like people would get together and kind of embrace some good trouble together. So it's got like some kind of just weird dynamics where like maybe they'd be killing each other on the field of battle, but maybe they'd come to Front Royal and like pass out at a bar, or what the good trouble looks like, right? So it's like it's got like this weird like I said, mystical energy to it, and I feel like a Christmas movie makes sense. So she wrote this beautiful script about an actress that moved to LA and now is coming home. So it's again in the vein of what we know, and it's a beautiful story. It's honestly a lot darker than a lot of your Christmas movies, which I really like. It's got like a little bit of that Christmas Carol vibe to it, but the darker sense of it. And again, I think what I've learned in my life, and this is a big thing that I got out of playing Fabian, right, is that as much as I love acting and it will always be the first love in my life, like I love collaborating. I love building a team. I love the different masters of craft. And I think what I'm really excited about is bringing a film back to Virginia that everybody can be proud of, and will be a love letter to Front Royal, just in the way that Brandon wrote a love letter to Montana and Polson, Montana specifically. So I think it's become like this very meta experience with me because of getting this role, and I think that the best thing that I can do with it is to carry it on.
Hmm. I've heard you talk about a story about auditioning for, and I have a follow up on this one. Auditioning for Pirates of the Caribbean. Now
Yeah.
it's kind of tough to go against the name of Johnny Depp, and then recently, I think he even turned down like almost $400 million, I think, for the most recent production they wanted to make. Tell me that story real quick about, you finding that out later on and doing that audition. And I think you described it as like one of the best auditions you had ever done, in your opinion.
Yeah, it was a great audition. I mean, I really had fun with it because, again, I just kind of got to dive deep into, the physicality of Jack Sparrow. He's kind of like a broken winged sparrow. He's all over the place, and, and he's always inebriated, which is a lot of fun. And, great casting director, Rana Kress, who casts a lot of the Marvel movies. And so I got to go to the Disney lot, which was just special. And again, you got to take these days as wins because, I mean, like, to be an actor, to show up at the Disney lot, to get to meet with a great casting director that's cast so many incredible projects is like a big win just in and of itself. So I'm showing up early, I'm walking around, just enjoying it. And I went in, I was very prepared because I'd watched, all on repeat, all of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, and just kind of dive deep into his physicality. And what was so hard about the audition were there were no lines. It was completely improv. And so, Rana basically said it was going to come down to a look-alike. But I just found myself like kind of, stumbling into the camera and like, just finding the voice and, just having a lot of fun with it. Like, and it was funny because she let me go. She said she let me go like an extra 2 minutes longer than everybody else because she was having so much fun watching me, right? And again, this is where I go back to like the audition is the win. Like it was a great connection. She's originally from New York, so we got to kind of reminisce about New York City. And it's relationship building, just like everything else. I try to get away from the word networking. It feels like I don't like that word. I really like relationship building. Like I really want to have good relationships with people, connecting, exactly, connection. And it was just one of those moments where I remember her saying in the room, she said, again, this is going to come down to a look-alike, Matt, but I just wanted to let you know that you had the best audition today. And it really meant a lot to me because at that point, Quinn, it made me feel like I knew how to do the work, like that I was being professional. I was preparing myself for whatever opportunities would come my way. And, sometimes they are few and far between, but if you can keep, enjoying the work whenever it comes to you, when you're granted an audition and you get joyful about that audition, then you can put something great together and then let it go and move on to the next one.
Mm. I mean, that's the I think one of the thing that maybe people that get into a creative space might maybe fear the most. And I think you might be able to really give good insights for people. They fear being judged. They, because literally there's judges doing the audition, right? And they fear going to these auditions and they fear the rejection and it's just kind of, like I said, dragging through mud a little bit, You sound like you don't, I mean, of course you're probably, you're human, but still, like, it seems like it's more of a game to you. It's more of like an enjoyment process, and the win is the audition. You've said that at least 3 times here, right? You're like, what would you give insights to people in terms of, like, if you are going through the mud and you just can't seem to get that win, but you're like, the audition process is driving me crazy. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back for me, like the days that I would go to Actors Equity and I would hang out there for 8 hours when I was non-union and just have really wonderful conversations with actors. And sometimes I didn't even get to audition. So you could say that I was there for 8 hours and I didn't get to audition. That's a failure, right? I didn't look at it that way. I really looked at it as it was like me putting myself out there, like regardless of whether I got in the room, like I wanted to put myself out there. So again, it's not always going to go the way that you want to, and you have to understand that. But when you get an audition, again, it's your opportunity to uniquely bring yourself to, the character. I mean, Tom Hanks says it. It's like, show up early, learn your lines and make some good decisions. Like that's really what acting is. And I just love that. It's like very systematic. Now, there's a lot of process that goes into making good decisions. There's a lot of technical aspects that go into making good decisions. I mean, being an actor is extraordinary because, again, you're constantly creating characters and figuring out ways to do that. But, for people listening, like, again, I just really do. I think that if you love acting, you're selling yourself short to say, well, I didn't get the part, so like now I don't believe in myself. Because again, I'll be the first person to say, like, that's gonna happen, but like just keep doing it. Like keep doing the work, keep enjoying the work. The reps that you can do, whether it's going to, acting classes, whether it's, reading a play, whether it's, I need to take a break from acting right now. I'm going to watch a football game. I'm going to, do some katas in the backyard, like whatever it is, like stay balanced. That way you can keep your passion going, really for your life. Because again, if it's something that you love, if it's your dream, and you give up on it and you still love it, you're going to be giving up a part of yourself. And what does that loss look like? So you kind of have to keep that perspective sometimes is, just keep loving it. And then I think that you become like this beacon of light, where you become a collaborator and, you start to have people in your life like I do now with Brandon Smith. And he's written another role for me, or he's in the process of writing another role for me. And I just like that, that means so much to me because it showed not only that I brought it as an actor, it's that I brought it as a collaborator, that I cared about his vision. And I always say this, but I mean, like, the relationship between an actor and a director is just one of the most intimate relationships. Like, it's so special because, again, it's about serving the work, and you find it together. And the way that we found Fabian was on Zooms like this, where we'd go scene by scene, because he wrote a lot of himself into, the character of Fabian and John, like as a schism of himself. And so I took that with a lot of responsibility, that I really wanted to make sure that I was telling his story, and telling it truthfully, and doing honor to the work and the words that he had crafted, and the sacrifice that he had made to, bring all of these actors together for 6 weeks in Montana. Because it's easy to think of an idea for a film. It's a lot harder to make the damn thing, and then, to cut it together, and then to put it out there. So you just, again, like, if you're one of the team, you become a collaborator, you become like just this beacon of light, and then I think things will find their way to you.
It's remarkable to me because, again, the same common theme that's coming up here in terms of your mindset. In a couple of years, I can't wait to have you back on here, and I can ask you the question that I can't ask right now, which is, what was it like not to step into the shoes of a role, but actually have a role written with you in mind? And I really can't wait to ask, like, what was the difference between that? Because you found Fabian, right? Versus, like, this was crafted deliberately for you. I can only imagine that there will be negatives and positives on both sides, and I would love to hear how that goes. But again, just to point out here, another commonality that I'm seeing here, when I was growing up in Bellevue before I ended up leaving Nashville, I grew up next to The Undertaker from WWE back in the day.
Wow, he was my favorite.
Yeah, really? Well, he was a next door neighbor.
He was my favorite.
Like,
wow.
Yeah, same. All the tattoos, all of it, and he was a great man, very kind. Two vicious dogs. I'll leave it at that. But when you hear his story, it was showing up, sitting on the bench, waiting for any of these casting guys to come in there and see me. And I was there for 5 hours. I was there for 6 hours. And some of the entrepreneur guys that again had the privilege of knowing, and you're like, oh my gosh, they were there, and they were, doing this and that. And I've come to learn that when some of these guys say, I analyzed 100 of my competitors, what they're not saying is, I analyzed a lot of them. They're not saying I analyzed 40. I analyzed 50. They're like, no. Like, I analyzed 100, and that's probably rounding down a lot. And I have a feeling it's the same way with you, and you're like, I was there for like several hours. I was there for 6 hours. I was there for 8 hours. I was there, like, I have a weird feeling. Those are the things that set you in particular apart. And the people I just described, it's like, they're not, The Undertaker, he wasn't there for a job. He was there because he wanted to be a wrestler. There's a difference. You wanted to be an actor, and you wanted to be good at it, and you wanted to learn the craft of it, and the whole element of social media comes on afterward, and connecting with people, and you got the buzzword, the networking, but first and foremost for you, it was, I want to act, and where can I do that? Right here. Where can I see people who are currently doing it? Right here. And that's where you're at. And I really hope a few people will take the golden nuggets that you've been dropping here, because like I said, I don't think they're casual when you say it, but I don't think God or the universe or whatever somebody puts that label, like, takes that as casual as we think. Does that make any sense? Like, I think that's being watched. And that sounds kind of weird, but I really do. I think that it is being watched. And it's like, there's a thing there. Oh, well, he needs to have a tire blowout, and then he's going to go to this rest stop, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, these are the stories, and this is why you're writing a Christmas play, right now, and whatnot. This is how it goes. But, I mean, what are some of so you named a few of them, but what are some of, like, the real fork in the road moments for you in your career up to date?
Moving to LA, moving to New York, and somewhere in Montana, really. I mean, it's the first time I've gotten to carry the weight of a story, in film, with three, four, five, six, great seasoned actors, and just learning from them. Learning by doing is the best learning tool that you can have. So I would say the big moves in my life have been forks in the road, and obviously I'm in a fork in the road right now because I've got my production company, and I just don't want to be content with the phone ringing anymore. I want to be creating. I want to be, collaborating. I want to build my team. There's just such a joyous thing when, you have the credits roll and you know every single person's name on the closing credits because those are the people that helped make a collective film that you were lucky enough to be a part of. And so I'm just grateful, and I continue to be grateful. I think it kind of stems from my childhood in Virginia, being that peaceful warrior as a practitioner of Okinawan Shorin-ryu, and just allowing that to be the path that I take moving forward.
Mm. So now for a really controversial question. You can be honest. If you had to choose, you're kind of settling down, you're retiring. Are you in New York or are you in LA? Or Virginia?
um, or Virginia. I don't know. I feel like home is where the heart is. I've kind of learned that in my life. I really don't know. I mean, that's the most honest question or answer I can give you right at this point. Maybe 5 years down the road, I'll answer it a little bit differently. But as it stands here, early 2025, I would say, I'll let the path continue to take me where it's going to take me because it's taken me to some really great places.
Mm. The mentors that mentored you, did they teach you, like you hear, I've never been on that side of the camera before, for film in movies, but you hear certain actors have certain rituals, right? And where I have quite a lot of experience is morning routines and business owners and entrepreneurs that do have very specific rituals that they put in place before they have an important meeting to get themselves into whatever peak condition, or just get themselves into a prime state, mentally acute, right? For you, do you have one of those, a kind of a routine or a ritual to get you in the zone before they call action?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that for me, the day before, especially in film, you give away a scene is kind of where your creative juices are the most flowing, right? Is that it's that moment where you're about to give away a scene, and that can come with a little bit of pain, believe it or not. There's a 10-page scene with Graham and I that is just everything I love about this film because it's a conversation amongst two men that are two different people. And at the end of this movie, I think what Brandon does so well is that we are still two different people and that we don't agree on everything and we don't need to find mutual respect and love for each other. But I think for me, I always do one last pass the day before, a scene that I give away. And sometimes, it's up until 10 p.m. Sometimes it's up until 2 a.m., where I just feel like, I am about to, pay honor to all the work that I've put into it, and so I really like to dissect it one last time, make sure that I'm not missing anything. And then again, when I show up on set, it really is a good feeling that I've allowed myself to do in my process is to just let it all go. Because you have to let it go, or else you will be in your head. You have to trust the work that you've done. You can bring great ideas to set. And I think a lot of that is collaboration, right? I mean, that's one thing that I give Brandon so much credit for is he created an ecosystem for us to really collaborate and to really give ourselves times to connect off screen. I mean, so many wonderful conversations that I had with my friend Graham, Michelle, that I'm just, I'm so grateful for. I'm grateful for them in my life, and we really connected through this story. I feel like we all needed this story. You know, he reached out to me a few weeks ago and made sure I was okay with the fires going around here. You know, Michelle is just a lover and a fighter for actors. She's on the SAG board, and her and her husband Garrett are so special for me and in my life because of just the you know the pros that they are and the amount of space that they give people. And I think that that's what I found of people that have, you know, career durations where, you know, they are working actors, which has always been the dream for me. And I think it's just really honestly that they find the joy in it still, and they give so much space to others, and they really do love just the art of being a collaborator and telling a great story.
Hmm. You mentioned SAG. I'd be, I have to ask a little bit. You know, there's quite a lot going on. There's a lot of buzz with AI and this and that, and there was a strike not too long ago, and all that. What's the general mood, kind of the inside baseball on between actors, because I mean, most people they see headlines, they hear headlines, but they don't have a true perspective, and I really don't want to be a headline reader personally, if that makes sense. And I know a lot of my listeners aren't either. They want to know more. They want to hear first person accounts and whatnot. But what's the general mood between actors and writers and kind of everything going on with SAG?
Well, as we record now, I mean, the Oscars were yesterday, and, you know, Honora, which was made for $6 million, the same amount of money that The Godfather was made almost 50 years ago, right? So we look at that, and it really is, it becomes like this call to action for, you know, independent filmmakers to say there is a place for us, right? And I love indies. I've always loved indies. I love, you know, films and stories that are driven by the page. They're driven by the acting. They don't have a lot of big productions to hide behind. And listen, I love the big productions too. I'm not going to lie, right? But there are some movies that innately, you know, should be given a shot because of the work that goes into them, even if the amount of money isn't there, right? So, you know, and for AI, I think specifically, um, it's a very unknown time, just like it is in every part of every industry in this world. But, you know, I really, really hope that people will continue to make human stories matter because they do. We need to see real, you know, people have real emotions on screen. I don't want kids, you know, 10, 20 years from now to be like, hey, mom and dad, there's this really weird movie. There's people in it, you know, it's like, and that's not out of the realm of possibility, you know, and again, I think what some people forget is that, like, you know, I love acting. Well, what does that mean? That means I love the process of acting. If you said that, you know, I could get into a box and get my likeness taken away from me and get my voice taken away from me, and they could computer generate a version of what I might do in a film, I would 100 out of 100 times say no, because I want to have that ability to create the work from myself, you know, and again, I think that there's this really scary thing where, you know, if we give up art to a computer, we will be giving up so much in our society that I don't think we'll ever be able to get back. So human stories matter, and, you know, continue to support indies, continue to support any indie that makes it to a theater like mine did, but really any indie, because again, these are people that are sacrificing, and I can't stress that enough. They are sacrificing. They're putting themselves out there. Sometimes they're taking loans against their houses to make these films happen. I mean, it is a fight to get some of these movies, and I speak from experience with Summer in Montana. Like, it really is, like, people put themselves in vulnerable positions because they believe in the story so much. And so, you know, I hope your listeners can hear that when they, you know, when they go to the theater. If they see you know, and they spend $10-15 on an indie, it means so much more to an indie than it does a big box office film. I can't stress that enough. So, you know, give those indies a shot. I mean, again, going back to when I moved to New York City, I used to go to Lincoln Cinemas all the time, and they just had indies there. They had no big budget films there, and I sometimes would, like, see 3 movies in a row because I just loved indies. So I think it's a place that I belong. It's hopefully a place that I'll always belong because I, even from a page, like just can tell the heart that's put into a story that's an independent film and how much those creators will fight for it.
Mm. Do you have a top 5 list of films? This is kind of like asking people their favorite rappers, and they're like, "Dad, you can't, who's better, Tupac or Biggie?" And you're like, "That's not. Why would you even ask that? You can't do that. They're different." Anyway, do you have a favorite like top 5 list?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on The Godfathers. I mean, I do love The Godfathers. I love like just the story behind The Godfathers and how it like literally almost wasn't made. Also, I mean, the nuances of Al Pacino and De Niro's work with Marlon Brando have always been actors that I've looked up to and seen myself in, right? Because I'm a Sicilian kid, so growing up seeing them, the Rocky movies, the underdog stories, Tom Hanks, anything that he does, Robin Williams, Hook, Mrs. Doubtfire, Child of Divorce, right? I mean, he can turn it on a dime and just make you just feel. And again, I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on, as you can imagine, but those are some that are coming to mind right now. And again, it really is. It's because, those are the people that I grew up not aspiring to be, but really learning from. Again, it's always about trying to find your own unique voice as an artist. And I think that that's the joy in it. But of course, why not learn from the best, right? And so I was just very fortunate to be in New York City. I actually lived across the street from Al Pacino. We went to the same diner. At one point, I mustered up the strength to say hi to him, and he probably knew I was an actor, and he looked right at me. And I said, "Have a good day, Al." And he looked at me. He said, "You too, kid." And it just really meant a lot to me because again, these are people that So again, be always learning. Be around people that have been doing it longer than you, and you'll continue to learn and grow. And that's really honestly what we should all be doing in life. So it's no different than being an actor is just continuing to learn and grow in this crazy journey we call life.
It's funny. Just added to the list of similarities. I'm actually Sicilian. My family's from Palermo.
Oh my gosh! So
Yeah.
Calascia Betta. I actually just went to Sicily with my cousin Jonathan. I'm trying to get my birthright citizenship right now, and
Oh, very nice.
yeah. And so
Wow.
we went to the little town that I'm from, and it's on my social media. It was just a really really cool thing to get them to page through these documents and to find my great great grandfather Calogero Drago, who obviously came through Ellis Island, probably like your family, and it was just a miraculous day where it just really kind of brought me back home because we're a product of other people's stories that we can't forget that. And I just remember realizing that Calogero was the youngest of 8 kids, and he was the only one that decided to board a boat to come to America. And I think about that bravery, and that's the reality. It's like I'm talking to you right now because of that decision that he made more than 100 years ago. And so it's just life, right? It's just it's
It
a
is.
special thing.
It is, and it's funny. My favorite independent film is A Bronx Tale, because my family, that was, and Chaz, who's also, by the way, his name is Calogero in real life, but Chaz, the actor, writing it himself about his own story, and that's my grandmother Gracie, but also my aunt Dot died at 105 years old, just fairly recently here, and grew up in the Bronx. Her phone number, she remembered up until like a few years ago, and she said it was one number. It was literally one number in the Bronx. So whenever I would see her before she passed, she is a walking textbook. We're talking about Victory Day of World War II. We're talking about the assassinations that shaped the 19th century. We're talking about, Times Square changing over time. We're talking about literally A Bronx Tale was their life. We're talking about the rise and the fall of the Sicilian mob, right? And these Sicilian families. So it's unbelievable. And you even mentioned The Godfather, it just Scorsese's ability to spend 5-10 seconds zooming in to make the point on a hallway, to really drive that home, and actually Tarantino is another guy that will really let a frame sit for an extended period of time to really make that show, make that shine. Now, they're not probably independent anymore, but that's because they put the character in it so much. Hey, now, they put the emotion into it so much that it just took off and people resonated with the real art. And now, the legends upon legends and whatnot. So even the people that are no longer independent had to start off right as the independent. They had to start from somewhere. Everyone starts from zero, I think, in modern terms. Just like you, the first time you were on the train headed to New York. Well, Matt, I want to thank you for your time here. I really, really enjoyed it. And like
Me
I
too,
said, in a
Quentin.
little bit of time after that role is done, I'm so even if you just like shoot me a quick message, I would love
Yeah.
to know how it was, what the difference was when a role was actually shaped specifically for you versus stepping into those shoes. I hadn't seen somewhere in Montana, but you have my word here. In the next like 2 weeks, I'm gonna go check it out, and I really want to see it. I did, just like you, actually reading the script 3 times. I did watch as many trailers as I could find multiple times over. Because it really is the story of our time right now, with the migration happening all over the country, and he said, she said, and these guys do that, and we do this, and we're different, and but finding that mutual respect, the commonalities, the connections that make us human are so, so important. And I know personally for me, I got some serious golden nuggets out of this, and I wanted to thank you for that, because I need that. That's what I've been missing the last couple months. That curiosity, that excitement again for life, and not just, be a one track and whatnot. So Matt, thank you, seriously.
Thank you so much, my friend Quentin. It has been a joy to be on your show today. These stories and these conversations are really impactful for me. So we'll definitely keep in touch. And thank you again for having me on today.